All right, can everyone hear me okay? Good. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate the invitation to show my work. Thank you very much to each of you. And I'm just proud to be here. It's been a joy to visit earlier with the artists that I got to do critiques with in the studios, um, and I appreciate you, William, inviting me, and Jasleen and Zidong. It's a wonderful program, and I'm proud to be here. I'm going to start off by sharing my screen and getting right to the document and talking about my work. I'm I'm happy if anybody wants to break in and ask any questions. Um, I threw in a bunch of slides here, so I don't know exactly how long it's going to. Let's see, this is supposed to change. Hold on. Ah, here it is. Nope. Of course, it's doing something totally different than it did before. Um, no, I don't want this. Okay, that's me. Um, okay, now I'm going to slide you over so I can see everybody. That way I won't feel like I'm so all alone out here. I can see all the faces. Okay, uh, so I thought what I would do, I know some people, some of you might be familiar with my work and some not. I have many bodies of work, more than several bodies of work that are on my website. But I tried to choose work for this presentation that would be give you a little bit of an idea of how I got to where I am with my work right now. So we can talk about processes, we can talk about concepts, but I'll just give a little overview of how I moved through my work from one body of work to another. And then again, if you want to explore further, please go to the site, and anyone's welcome to be in touch with me through social media or email, however you like, if you want to ask any further questions. And I know we'll have time for some questions at the end. So although I did a lot of work before 2011, I wanted to start here because this kind of is an introduction to how I started making some changes in my work into 3D qualities. Um, so this is a piece called it's in the subsurface. So I can also share this PDF, but if I click here, I could go right to the website. So if anybody wants to see other pieces in the meantime, we could go back through, then I can click through here and we could go right to the site and see other pieces from that body of work, from this body of work. Um, this piece is called Suspension. And I started using encaustic years ago. I don't know, maybe like 13, 14 years ago, but not exclusively. I've never been exclusive to any one product or material, but I've loved exploring lots of products and materials and processes and getting a lot out of them. So I might have focused, and I'm still focused on, well, I focus on a variety now, um, but all in the service of the concept. I really feel like I choose my materials to talk about the concepts. And it's not untrue that I might just really want to like explore a particular material and play with it as well. But I'm going to find some reason or some way to attach that concept to that material. So back at this time when I was using the encaustic, I was pretty crazy about the material. And what I wanted to speak to, like in this piece and in this series, was some kind of cracking open or depth and to the work. And so this is what I called a pour. And so what I was doing is I don't know if you could see these like little lines around here. This was, it's hard to see maybe in the photography, but I built like these dams in here with a like tape, and then inside was all this crunchy encaustic and silk and fabrics, and then on the top I did a pour, and I pulled out that dam so the top of it is super smooth and the stuff underneath is all crunchy. And I wanted to speak to the idea of like having an inner life and an outer life. And as I started working with these materials and my concepts more and more, I can see a thread over the years of identity and, personal exploration into identity and, the big questions, who we are, what the heck we're doing here, all of those things. But it became more and more refined and more pointed as things moved along. Um, I, at some point, decided that, well, it was interesting. I'll go back just a little bit. There was pieces that I was doing. There were pieces in this series, and I really thought like my concepts were coming across really well. And like obviously you could see I was talking about identity and my inner life and outer life and everyone's else's too, until a friend of mine, artist friend of mine, uh, said something to the effect of, your work could benefit by, and then my ears started ringing like, oh no, like it's my message isn't coming across, and I was all full of woe and angst for a long time, like just how could I? It's scary to like make your work more pointed and saying something more direct. Um, and being universal at the same time. And I didn't know how to do that. And so, taking on that fear a little bit, it doesn't look like it, but you know, artists know that. Like when you get to saying something more about yourself, more revealing, it can feel scary, like you're on an edge. And, to have those discussions about your work and what it's about and why you made it and why you chose that is an act of bravery. Um, so so I started bringing some photography into my work, but I didn't want to just make like inserts of photographs, but I started like really thinking about what is it I love about art, and it is art history and the history of art painting, but also nature and how everything is related. So like just thinking about biology and painting and photography and all kinds of things in nature that even overlap visually and physically and emotionally. So in this piece, again, I don't know like how well you can see all of it, but in here I really like these. So up here is like like a oops, sorry, I'm gonna go back up. Is a banyan tree, image of a banyan tree here. And this piece is a decent size, 46 by 46. So I was enlarging my images, I'm collaging, I'm doing transfers of images. So I was playing around in a lot of ways of how to use imagery. Some of it's getting disguised and hidden, and some of it is out there and more bold. But I wanted to use shapes that made sense to me, and I didn't have to like. So up here is a image of a bird wing, but I didn't feel like I had to cut it into a shape of a wing. And here I wanted to use this shape, but there's clouds in here, but I didn't really feel like I had to make a cloud shape out of it. So I'm using the images to assist a sense of, well, this piece is called Continuum's Edge, and I wanted to bring out a history. So down here on the bottom is one of my all-time favorite paintings, and it's Peter Paul Rubens, and it's Massacre of the Innocents. And that piece just has so much motion, and I've always loved it. I think because of the organic qualities and the movement and that swirling motion, and then come to find out that banyan trees are actually not really trees. They are tree of sorts, but what they do is they grow on top of trees. They use trees and other things as hosts. So they actually come down from above. They're almost like a virus that eats things up. So it's kind of like, and you'll see later on in the work, I talk about like facades and, fakery and, again, what we present on the outside and what it is on the inside. So it appears as one thing, but it's actually another thing. Um, and we're all many things inside, and we're many things that we present to the world. Um, this is obviously bird wings, just relating nature and then some kind of depth to life. This is called an uncommon knowledge. 30 by 30 photography and caustic wax monotype.
Yeah.
This piece is a milkweed pod.
Mm.
So I tiled my image real large. I changed it to pink. I used to, I don't know if anyone has ever done this, but sometimes you go through stages where you love a color, you hate a color, and then all of a sudden you love it. And so I felt that way about pink. To me, pink was like one of these, oh, I would never use pink because it's too girly. It's too this. It had all these like, um, you know, uh, to me like overtones and meanings. And then suddenly something happened. I loved pink. And it had to be a certain pink in a certain way, in a certain relationship. And that sort of morphed. And I have let go of that hatred big time. You'll see a lot of pink in my work in the future. Um, but this whole body of work was called Symbiosis, the last ones I've been showing you. And they showed at the Museum of Art in Wichita Falls, Texas, and at MSU, and was a Condren Contemporary. And um, it it was interesting to look at the work and think about the work. And I think now when I do a show, I always tend to kind of start to ask myself, like, where does it need to go next? Like, what's happening with this work? And as I was looking at this milkweed pod, the question just kept coming into my mind, like, what if this were three-dimensional? And what would it look like if I made a 3D object? And I had done some sculpture in the past, but mostly bronzes, and that was a different life of different images for another day. But I decided to like start working dimensionally, and I wanted to work with wire and plaster, and I thought I was making a milkweed pod, and we are all artists on this platform, so you can see that didn't happen. And we know what that's like when you plan a certain thing and then that plan becomes something else. So this piece, I started off with that idea, but it quickly became a series of whole different things. So this series, it was called Plate of the Pleasure Pods. And what happened was it became like each one of these was some pieces in this series, which became a show, was a particular archetype. And if you look at archetypes, they can be anything that is some standard or concept that you hold, some construct that you hold in your mind of how things should be, or how you get a flavor of what a queen would be like, or what you can name any structure in, and you have an opinion and a thought, and just how that breaks down. So this piece is called The Temptress. So as I was making this, I started thinking, oh, what if, like, she kind of looks like she's fresh and pink and flush, but at the same time kind of dying and decrepit and like used. and abandoned. And I thought, what if you just sort of came across her, I'm calling her her, in a forest and just would be walking by, or, as you walked by, what would you think? Is this a dead thing, a live thing? And I started using objects that I would enter into this, like, of course you can imagine, like these are bed springs, and what that starts to take on as far as, like, you know, this aging temptress and bed springs and some life, but also dying. And so that was the first piece in this series. This one is called Queen for Day. And excuse me. So I was using a lot of this foam and acrylic, and I found this rusty old topper up here, and this band from a lampshade, and found this fabulous like little footstool, like that was all ancient, well, antique at least. And I just thought it was humorous, like to think that people had to have like an actual little footstool for their little feet to lean on. And so again, it's the queen, the absurdity of being queen for the day, and the absurdity of being held aloft as in high esteem, and also the reality of we feel like that sometimes. We feel like a queen, and then we feel like we're not, so we can hold both things, or I can, like, look at how I view myself in so many ways, and that can change from minute to minute in your day. It could be that you feel really good about things, and 10 minutes later you're not. So a lot of these works speak to that. This is called The Diva and Her Deflated Ego. And she's up on a pedestal. And then the image on the bottom here is Narcissus, from Caravaggio's Narcissus. So, looking into the pool, into his reflection, and seeing his own reflection, his own beauty. And I have another image from that, of that piece and situation. So this was in the gallery. I like this image because, somebody's viewing it, and she's kind of mimicking the exact pose. And, again, it just felt like looking back at your history, and, aging, all kinds of discussions around that. One of the interesting things with this body of work was that I really wanted I wanted to speak to somebody and have them write on my work that would be a Jungian psychologist. And so I'm in Dallas. Excuse my hoarse throat. I thought I would go on and see if I could find somebody from the Jungian Society to write about my work and come speak at my for my artist talk. So I went on to the Dallas Jungian Society website, and I found the first one on there who studied in Switzerland at the institute and all of this. And guess what? She was one of my students in my class, and I didn't even know it. So anyway, I asked her if she would write on my work, and she did. And she wrote extensively on each one of the pieces, and that's on my website as well. And we had an artist talk. Sorry, my voice. I just got back from New York, and I had got like really run down, I think. But I have a little bit of laryngitis, so I apologize. Anyway, I can find a cough drop. So she wrote on the work. When we had our talk, she came and spoke, and it was so great because we went around from one piece to another. And we spent like 2 hours with everybody. Everybody was talking about like how what they saw in the work and how they related to it. And it was just really a joy. I mean, that's like really meant to be when you like, oh, you're in my class. He's right here. So anyway, my next body of work, well, it wasn't even next. You'll see there's other bodies on the site, but this one is called Suspended Beliefs. And so I was also speaking to the idea of glamour and being overly embellished and over everything, like just too much over the top, too indulged. And you know, what makes an icon, what makes somebody like above another person in any way, and how we think of money or royalty or riches or position in life, again, identity, falsehoods, again, like what's happening on the outside. So anyway, I used a lot of materials that are low budget, but like filled with lots of gold paint and things like that. This is Tyvek that I use back here, and these like a cupid, like a plaster cupid, and this is a monotype on paper back here, and I'm just making these like mirror type shapes, like a mirror on the wall, and did an exhibition with this work as well in Laguna Beach at Art Cube Gallery. This is 3 pieces together on a wall. I don't know how readable this is, but so there's one on the wall, the piece in the back and the top, and then this quilted vinyl I was painting on is on the bottom right. And then on the left is a 3D object that's built with wire. And then I used Tyvek and printed it on it and sort of wrapped this 3D object with the print. And that's Bouguereau's like, cupids and nymphs and just flying around on there. And in the back, on the back one is one of my all-time favorite pieces that I morphed in Photoshop. And that's from Hieronymus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights back here. Just some of the imagery, it's not super obvious. But again, if you look at that Garden of Earthly Delights, you see the three stages, paradise, all the craziness, and then, the depths of hell. This is another piece from that series, and it's called Promised Land on a Shelf. Kind of speaks to that title. Again, a couple of cupids in a beautiful little sailboat there. In between a lot of my series, I do work on paintings on paper. I like to use make what's called monotypes, and many people are familiar with monotypes. If you're not, it's basically a printmaking process where you're laying down some paint, and while it's viscous, you can put some paper down and pick up the color, pick up the paint. And so if you could imagine, let's say you took any acrylic or oil paint and got it really washy, laid it on a sheet of, whatever, paper, not paper, on a surface like an acrylic board or a table or something, then you put your paper down and pick it up, you're going to have a print of that. But in this case, I'm working with encaustic, so it has to be a heated surface. And I have what's called a hot box. And so it's a heated surface, and I make a lot of my own encaustic paints, and I also use some RNF or encausticose paints, and do some combination. And I also teach this, and so I paint on, and then you can do layers, you can scrape back, you can enhance it with any inks or watercolor. It's really versatile and beautiful. And again, I like to do this in between series because sometimes you can feel lost after a show, like I don't know what I'm doing next, and especially if you change themes like I do a little bit from one body of work to another. you could get back in your studio and feel completely lost. So this is kind of a nice way to warm up and loosen up. These are all monotypes. So all of these hanging pieces are paintings that I did on paper and pulled together to make an installation. So I did many, 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 many monotypes, and um, I put them together like either with I cut them out, which was really fun. Like, so, okay, so I took the encaustic, I made the monotype, and then everywhere there was white paper, I was able to tint with inks. And because I don't want really vibrant inks, I would, basically dilute them with a lot of alcohol. And then I could just tint over the whole thing, even on top of the encaustic, and it would just shift the colors. So I was able to get some nice variations. And I enjoyed the process of just like cutting everything out and cutting small shapes and belting them into each other, and creating like open areas and holes and things like that. Um, Having done that, I was able to kind of either attach everything with a two-faced tape, or just back to back and clipping the pieces together. And so this was hanging up in New York at M. David and Co. Um, and then this is just another little view. I like that kind of image. So I did a installation with that work. So like just having loosened up with the monotypes gave me an idea of doing a whole installation. And that series is called Impermanence Now. I like the idea of impermanence and now in the same sentence. And then I also made a large, it looks kind of dwarfed here. It's a pretty large piece, photography does that, but it's a pretty large piece. It's 86 by 73. And that is at, this was at Forum 6 in Houston. And that piece is called Small Shifts and Massive Alterations. Another combination of monotypes, but because monotypes and paper is like the most unruly thing. It just wants to do whatever it wants to do. It gets all bubbly and crazy, and it doesn't want to sit on a board. And so I was like, I'm not going to fight you, paper. I'm just going to let you do what you want to do. And I let it hang on the wall. Again, those are all attached to one another, many different papers. I started then to get into to some other bigger 3D works. And this is, oops, that is not the correct name of this piece. This piece is The Cloud as an Object. So I still had the same title on there from the other one, so I have to fix that. But this is foam and fake fur, pink fur, and it is it's a large piece. It's probably about 50 by 40, and it is sticking out of the wall on pipes. So let me see if this next, no, I don't have an image of that, but I could go to that if anybody wants me to later. But I got you a close up of what the materials look like. So it's foam, quite a bit of foam that I sprayed on I made a substrate to spray on top of, and then I cut it up with a saw and painted it, and then added this some faux fur on top of it. And then going to some other objects. This is in my series called Some Parts. And this is wire and plaster, and I did some encaustic on top, and there's even some additional materials like two-part film that I use. And again, this is not the title of it. Sorry, messed up on there. And this is called Hunger Object. And so I saw these two little areas here, and they look like little teeth. So I called that Hunger Object, and that just reminded me of, like all of our needs. And You know, how much is enough? So it was a pretty hungry piece. You'll see some of these pieces appear later in some other iterations. This piece is called Undress, and it is Tyvek and inks and acrylic and mulberry bark and vinyl. And I did a lot of sewing on this piece and sewed this piece together. Here is a close-up of some of the materials, and you can see it's all hand sewn, all stitched all the way around. And that's bleached mulberry bark and a lot of acrylic. Now I'm working into my area of installation. So it had always been my dream to, like, how do I go from 2D to 3D? How do I go to 3D to installations that relate to each other? So how to place these things in a space so they'd have a conversation was the question. And it's taken me a long time to make the work and think about how it all relates to each other and to get it out into the floor, out off of the wall. So this is a big tree root that I painted with kind of like a pink color and rusted mulberry bark. Back here in the very back, you'll see that cloud piece again. So a lot of times I'm reusing my pieces in different ways in different exhibitions. And up there on the wall too is Hunger Object. And there's a hanging piece here, hanging from the ceiling, and that's a painting on paper. Here it is here on the left. And this was at University Mary Hardin Baylor. And that gallery was really gorgeous. It was very beautifully designed, nice big square. And so that has some collage material, again, from Hieronymus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights. The lighting was great for the shadows. This is from a show called Behind the Scene, and that was at a gallery called the Art Gallery at Collin College. And you'll see again, here is the piece on the left with the cloud piece. Here's the tree. And many, many pieces in this that made up this exhibition. Again, just starting to try to find relationships and how everything could be placed where it's more of an experience you're walking through as opposed to one piece, you know, just exploring that. Here's another view. Just using all kinds of materials, Foz shape and Duralar and heating and Yupo and inks and latex and two-part foam and natural branches. A lot of my work is, I like confusing the materials so that like one material might be completely manufactured plastic, but manipulating it in such a way that it might look like a natural form, like this little piece on the bottom here might be something that looks like you'd find in nature, like leaves, but it's not at all. It's another view. And like you could see this piece on the right jutting out from the wall. And again, the shadows are important with that tree piece that's hanging. This piece is the sitting on the floor, the blues, and with this root sticking out of it. So take notice of that one. It's called the heart, and you'll see it again. This piece is called Conduit, and it is another tree root. I really love the roots, and I had a base fabricated that's made out of steel, and I designed it and had somebody make that out of steel for me, which I'd like to learn how to do that myself. So it's, you know, be a foray into a whole different thing, heating that steel and bending it. But I like it's like, how do you get something up off the floor without it being a base, without it being a pedestal, and making it part of the piece. Here's another view of that with, the great lighting and shadows. And here it is again on the floor in another show. This is called I Make My Own Weather, this exhibition. And that was just recent. And it was at the MAC here in Dallas. And these foam forms that are on the floor, I made photographs of that surface, printed them out, and that's the raindrops that are on the wall. And so I like using whatever I can of the pieces that I'm using into other iterations and spaces. So again, that's the photograph of the surface of this foam piece, photographed, printed, and then made into wall pieces. And then there's another object hanging from above. It's another view, kind of like this piece being up on the card. It was called The Berg, like piece of an iceberg, and just found humor in thinking about it being moved around on a cart. We think about the climate crisis, and I mean, there's nothing funny about it, but big chips of like an iceberg breaking off, and how much like notice do you give to our comfort level and what we need to do to stay comfortable versus what's happening with the climate crisis as it is. Here's another view of two of the foam pieces. As you can see, pink is no fear now, and I even like the fluorescent colors of it. And you could Google this, or you could find it too, I think on my site. Edward Bertinsky documented a lot of these spaces that just filled with pollution. There was like this one of these mountains in I believe he was in Africa that was just complete and utter trash, big landfill, but it was so beautiful, like with all these colors, like all of this trash that was like neon and colorful. And there's like people living in it, picking through it. It's just amazing and shocking and beautiful and ugly and all of those things at the same time. And you can find out more about him and his work it's called the Anthropocene Epic. There's a documentary, and also you can see his photography. This is another view of the space. I called these weather maps, these three pieces, which are encaustic, this printmaking on the paper. This is called Pink Synthetic Cloud with Real Light. So again, I like confusing what's synthetic material, what's not, what's natural, what's synthetic. And so that's made with Duralar, which is just like a thin plastic. And then I heated it, formed it, sewed it together, and poured some pink paint on it. So that's a nice size, and it's about 40 inches-ish, and hangs in the space. Also, in entering photography into my work, I see we only have about 15 minutes left, so I might speed through these a little bit. I take pictures when I'm on a walk, and this was a wonderful tree that looks like it was really had everything happen to it, whether it was like some kind of damage from lightning, and then maybe somebody was trying to save it and they were cutting into it. So it just had a lot of interest to it. I think it's a beautiful tree. This is called Salute, Salute. And then I used it in this piece that I made a 3D object. It's called Tree Under Construction, Majestic Environment Included. And just to think about, like, getting to the point where it's like, oh, there are no real trees. We have to kind of make them for our landscape, and how we quaff our environment. And this is another view of it. It has tree bark and paintings of a landscape and the photography all in one piece. And then that piece that was on the floor is now hanging on the wall here. That's called the heart. And then there's a monotype on the floor. The heart is, 3.5 foot by 4.5 foot. Again, up on pipes that jut out of the wall to let it sit on there. I thought I'd throw this one in, a little bit of humor at the end here. So this one in the space next to the restroom, they had Marcel Duchamp's urinal piece. And so I answered that with a small object of my own, upside down in that shape. And then I'll just talk very briefly through the rest. This is the visitation project. This project came out of the COVID, when it was very frustrating not to be able to realize my work anywhere in any space. I got this idea when I was at my son and daughter-in-law's. They were redoing their home, and this particular was the dining room, and they had ripped all the wallpaper off. And I thought, I said, could I hang my piece here and photograph it? And they were like, no, we're cleaning up tomorrow. So I took a photo of their dining room just like this, and I photoshopped my piece into the room. That gave me an idea to do what I call the visitation project. Excuse me. And I started asking people for photos from anything. It could be mundane, it could be glamorous, whatever it was, and I would Photoshop my work into their space. And so Jane Cornish Smith sent me this one. This is an Airstream and trailer, and I Photoshopped one of my pieces kind of blowing out of that. And this was a friend, Diane Tenorelli's, who does wonderful ceramics. And she had posted that she, was sad she didn't have a lot of Christmas decorations. And I'm like, I can give you a decoration. And I put one of my pieces on her house. And this is my brother-in-law's, actually, a picture in at Mammoth Lakes. And I put my piece, Hunger Objects. I photoshopped it into this space. So that is a whole project on the site about that. This one was an outdoor exhibition called Supernatural at Terrain Dallas. And I believe it was born out of the COVID situation. So everything was outdoor. You could drive by. You didn't have to be around a lot of people, but the exhibition is outside, and she held many exhibitions there. So it was really fun to see these pieces over the course of a month, what would happen to them. And they did change and morph, but in a wonderful way, with rains and the heat. This, I just got back from New York. I did an installation with a couple other people called Stories of the Post-Natural. And that was in Tivoli at Judy Pfaff's compound. And here's some close-up images of the pieces that are on the floor installation. And that's it. That's the run through. So anyway, if anyone has comments or questions, things that I could speak to on the work, I would be thrilled to do that. And if you don't, just make something up.
Well, I love the combination of materials and the approach of taking like classic materials, paint and caustic, and then then incorporating both historic images when you use the Photoshop or you use the prints of classic paintings, and then then the use of like natural materials, the roots, the trees, the iron. There's a wonderful vitality that it's almost again it's this marriage of what's in our mind and what comes in from nature through our eyes.
Right.
And I'm quite taken by it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. It's like, how do you put everything that's in, historical and visual, textile, tactile, um, and get them all to work together in a way that, is pleasing to the actual making and makes sense, as a subject, as a story, as a narrative. So thank you. I'm glad you see that.
Well, I also like the narrative quality too, because it's one of those things that, you can use very abstract formats. And I think that's one of the things that works with your installations. When you were talking about getting the pieces to talk with one another,
Huh.
that, you see them as like little individuals when you make them.
Yeah.
And, but then it was like, well, we have a conversation with one another.
Yeah.
And yeah, and also the idea of like, well, you take a photograph of your piece and then use it as part of another piece. And I think that's a real, it's an insightful way to express the kind of like evolution of our thinking and seeing, that we see things one way and then, we see them again in another. So again, your flexibility is inspirational.
That's exactly it. I mean, I, it's like how do you get meta about like self-aware, like this particular, you know, uh, material is photographed into this, piece. And so it's like everything is about itself and related, but you're right. It's like, these are little individual personalities, and then how do they, move around the room? So you have to make or at least I did, guess it takes a while to make a lot of work so that you can fill a space and do that. It's,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
There's a question in the chat. It says, how do you store all your pieces?
That's a very good question. So right now I have 3 studios. I have 2 teaching studios, and then I have my personal studio in behind the 2 teaching studios. So right now, so last year, after like, I don't know, several years of having my studio in the back, I found it really frustrating to like, how am I going to photograph my work so that I can show a gallery or a space or make a presentation for an exhibition, um, if I don't have a space to photograph it in? So it's different when you're photographing a painting or, a sculpture. So I was starting to like borrow people's, like a gallery space or, some other space. And then I'd have to like get everything in a truck, move it to the space. They maybe somebody give me a day or two, I could play around in a space, and then I had to get out. So it really wasn't enough time to explore and see relationships and make changes. So I took a dive last year and took half my studio, and I had it redone so that half of it, it's like a big U shape now, in that where I got the walls finished out and I did the floor. And so I have a U that I could build into and make an exhibit, like a mini exhibition or mini installation. It's not huge, but it's about maybe 350 square feet, and unfortunately only 8-foot high ceilings, but it's enough that I could get some good photography and get in there. So that half of my studio is either taken up with that kind of use, or and then the other half is like tons of supplies, like just all over the place. But what I started doing was storing my pieces. So I have a drop ceiling, and I can put clips on the drop ceiling and hang a lot of my work. So storage is on the ceiling. And I have one area that's a bookshelf, and a big shelf, not a bookshelf, but big shelving. And I could put a lot of my supplies in clear buckets up there. I have things under tables. I have things all over the walls. I have, so it is a problem. But I'm lucky that I continue to reuse my work over and over, in addition to making new work. So a lot of times it's just the same pieces repainted or reworked somehow. So I guess that keeps it at some minimum, but it's not easy. I don't have like an outdoor store I think if I put it someplace else, I would just maybe forget about it. I kind of have to have everything in view. Oh, thank you. I'm seeing some thank yous in the chat.
Bonnie, I have a question. There was a piece in the beginning of your presentation where you mentioned that it didn't quite go as planned and therefore it became something else.
Yes.
And this is something that a lot of us can relate to in the art practice. And I'm just wondering if you can talk more about that making process for you and how you know when you have to let go of that initial idea so that the material and the piece can take on a new form.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. I mean, the first time I think that happened to me, I was really depressed about it because I didn't know where I wanted to go. It's very uncomfortable place to be when you don't know like what you want to do, but you know you want something. And I think I did discover that I'm able to, having gone through that very difficult period for a few years, that now I know that just get moving, just make. And as you're making, the thing will happen. And I think it's just a matter of moving. And so I think um, once you're, I think in the very beginning, those concepts of what it will be or should be seem so important. And then you can see that like that still continues to happen, but it happens in a different way. And so you're never going to stop being you. Your stuff is still going to come out of you. So you don't have to even really worry about like, oh my gosh, this is something else. It's not, it's still you. And so uh I think the more you make and the more years you have into it, the more you can feel confident in that. There's still scary times, but you'll start to see that, oh, I always feel scared in that middle period. I always feel scared and unsure. And, you could do everything like if, I don't know, I'd have a lot of inner dialogue that's negative, like, who do you think you are? And that's terrible. And what were you thinking? And like, you could never pull that off and you never did. And that's your last chance, like all kinds of ugly dialogue telling me how terrible I am. And then the next minute you could hear yourself go, oh, that's genius. That's like such a great idea. And, if you just stand back and look at that and think about how your mind changes every couple minutes and recognize that, this is your brain on autopilot doing what it does. And that, again, like just the making, and you will see something. And I think once I saw that what I was making had this Jungian archetype kind of idea, it was like that stuck. Once that stuck, I can make anything I wanted in the studio. And I was making one personality after another, which were all my personalities. And like I have pieces in that body of work you can look through. And I think at the time we're always going through a lot. I'm always going through a lot, at least in my mind. But at that time I was having a lot of doubts and fears. And it was important for me to do that work at the time because it was just like, I don't know, I came out on the other side of it with like a lot of confidence. So, but like that first piece that I did, it started off in all kinds of bad ways. At one point, it just like looked like a turkey, and then a friend of mine was like, "We'll just saw it up." And I never had the idea to like saw my piece up, and I was like, "Maybe I will." And so like I just got out my Sawzall and chopped it up, and I was like, that was so freeing, like just don't hold anything as precious. And you know, it's precious, but it's not. Everything is that. Everything is one thing and the other. So yeah, like just holding all of that as it's okay to have both. Yeah. I don't know. I hope that answers that question a little bit.
It does. That was a great answer. Thank you.
Sure.
One more question in the chat, and I think that'll be our last one.
Okay.
How do you prepare the roots to paint and that galleries and museums are comfortable to exhibit them? Often institutions are concerned with bugs and organic material.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, so far so good. With the roots that I've had, I have coated them with like an acrylic or a what is the other one I use? Like like a like a epoxy stain, I want to say. And so I do try to make sure if I'm using something that it doesn't, I wouldn't be bringing any bugs or anything, like make sure it's really dried out. Unfortunately, I'm not in a financial position to like have a big unit where you could like dry your wood for 3 years and then work on it. Or, I would love to just like cast a big aluminum root like that or giant, but, just not in that position at this point. But I think if you make something stable enough looking and feeling like you can, just, I would never like crate that and ship it, but I would like put it into a truck, which I have done. Like I've rented large trucks and then, it can go across country just fine. So it might be different if you were working with a bigger institution, like a more major museum, but so far I haven't had that pushback. And, that could be very much a hindrance, I would imagine. But you could also say, great, like, is there a budget for me to cast this work? Is there, you could have some kind of conversation like that. So I haven't run into any pushback that I know of. Who knows? People might be making judgments to not accept the work because of that. So, but yeah, you want to make it at least look like it's secure or feel secure. So, you are welcome. I see thank yous from the chat.
Well, if nobody has any other questions, I guess we'll conclude this artist lecture this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you all so very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming, Bonnie.
It's a pleasure.
Thank everybody for coming out. And this is the last one of the summer, and we'll have some more awesome programming coming this fall. So make sure to tune in and check it all out.